This is Tihomir Opačić and Miloš Đekić with the IT Serbia Podcast, speaking with two very, very cool guys. We just heard their presentations today on PHP Day, which was organized by PHP Srbija. So without further ado, I would like to present Mr. Sebastian Bergmann and Mr. Michelangelo van Dam. And our topics today are not so tightly related to testing, which is your expertise and specialty, but instead the IT and the community and maybe let's call it giving back to community. So I would like to start off with a very quick question. Mr. Sebastian is actually the author of PHP Unit, something we are already aware of and we all know what that is. So we would like to ask you, what was the motivation behind building such a tool? And did you have an idea that at some point it's going to get this far and everybody's going to use it, everybody's going to see your name whenever they start a build?
Oh my God. TLDR, yes, there was an idea. No, I had no idea that so many people would use it. And the thing with my name in the output, that just happened. But the slightly longer version, 13 years ago, when I started to work on PHP Unit, I was still in university. And I was blessed with a couple of really good professors, one of which was friends, or probably still is friends, with Erich Gamma. And very early on, when JUnit came out, he started using JUnit and was so enthusiastic about it that he just had to share the concept of unit testing and test-driven development with the students. So I learned about this from him very early, when nobody else or very few people were talking about unit testing and test-driven development. And he knew that I, at the time, was already very involved in the PHP project, going to conferences, helping with community events, translating the manual for PHP from English to German, fixing bugs in PHP, designing certain features for PHP 5, and so on. And one day, he came to me after a lecture and said, well, I know you like PHP, but I also see that you like this concept of unit testing and test-driven development. And as far as I know, as an outsider to the PHP world, there is no tool like that for PHP. So what do you do now? Do you now come over to the dark side? We have cookies and JUnit, or do you do something else? And I said, well, I don't see why this shouldn't be possible to do also in PHP. So I started Googling, or probably not Googling.
What version of PHP was active back then?
Back then, PHP 4 was the current version.
Yeah.
4.0, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And on the horizon, very, very far ahead, was PHP 5.
Yeah.
OP.
So I searched around, and back then we did not have GitHub. There was SourceForge, and I found something called PHP Unit on SourceForge. I downloaded it and couldn't get it to work. It was built according to the README for PHP 3, but I couldn't get it to work with PHP 4. I also couldn't get it to work with PHP 3. Tried to get in contact with the author, but the thing about SourceForge was you cannot really get in contact with someone. The person didn't reply, and I waited for a couple of weeks, and then I decided, screw it, I'm going to do this myself, and started porting the ideas of JUnit to PHP, which was a really painful experience because JUnit does something that you should never do unless you're building a test framework, which is it uses exceptions to change control flow. But in their philosophy, when a test should always pass, and when a test fails, that is an exception, and that's why they use exceptions to mark test failures. And I liked the idea, but PHP 4 didn't have exceptions.
Yeah, just errors.
So I had to simulate them, and it was a really painful experience. So I quickly gave up on building PHP Unit for PHP 4 and did something that turned out to be a really good idea, because I started from scratch and built PHP Unit for PHP 5. And with almost every line of code that I wrote for PHP Unit at the time, I uncovered a bug in Zend Engine 2 the core of PHP 5. So it was good for PHP Unit. It was good for the PHP project because I was usually the first person to try to use a new PHP 5 feature in production and found a lot of bugs in it. And at that time, I was very active in the quality assurance initiative for PHP itself. So I've found a lot of bugs and wrote tests for those bugs for PHP and helped fix those bugs, and was really good.
Yeah, that's really a great answer. And I think that your work has greatly gave birth to. I mean, there's a buzzword like PHP Renaissance that's been going on for the last, I don't know, 2, 3, or maybe even 4 years. That's kind of, PHP was always considered by quote unquote more like serious programmers a web language that does WordPress and stuff, but not very good for serious stuff. So somewhere around the PHP 5.3 release, and with Composer launching, I think that's like some kind of breaking point where everyone considered PHP like, a decent language.
Not really. Hi, Internet, Michelangelo here. I worked with PHP since 2001, and from 2001 all the way up to 2007, beginning of 2008, it was a struggle. I mean, I worked in enterprises, and working with other teams means that you were doing something that the nephew of the CEO could do. Yeah. So people didn't consider you to be serious. The fact that they had to shut down their mainframes because there was a new release, that was a concept they found very normal. And we were building web applications, public-facing interfaces for customers to upgrade their products and all that. So the back-end system went down, means the website went down as well. Yeah. We came up with solutions to either have some sort of a synchronization. If the backend went down, all the transactions were kept locally, and then once backend system was back up, it was synchronizing all the changes back into the backend system. So over the years, we actually proved that we also have a value within enterprises. But it wasn't until 2008 when the financial crisis hit the world like a sledgehammer. I was working at a government company. They had like 150 people in Navision. They had a couple of 100 people working for Java. And we saw these teams disappear overnight because there was no money anymore. And then we were a small team, 6 people, and all of a sudden we got all these other projects as well, on top of our own projects. And from 2008 all the way to 2012, we were able to come up with solutions for these projects with lesser budget, with shorter release cycles. So we were doing a very good thing. And I think the period between 2008 and 2012 was basically the game changer for PHP, because that was where PHP actually stepped forward and showed the world, hey, we can do this. Yeah.
So it was like financial crisis that drove the PHP to enterprise level.
Well, and enterprise were running out of budgets. I mean, every marketing budget or commercial budget was frozen or was decreed in terms of the amount of money that was available. But the project still needed to occur. So if you don't have the money to buy very expensive proprietary developers, there's not a lot of solutions out there that you can turn to except for open source, because you don't pay for licenses, so that reduces your budget expenses really in half. The developers that work in PHP back then, they were not that expensive. I mean, they were like half or a third of the other technologies. And this is where they said, okay, well, we can have these projects done by a smaller group of people for less money, and they still achieve those goals. And that was like the business seeing, okay, open source has a value inside the enterprise. And this is the game changer. This period of time was really the game changer for a lot of open source technologies, not just PHP.
Yeah.
If I consider, enterprise businesses and basically, PHP in enterprise business, what I know about the enterprise is there's a lot of specification, a lot of acceptance. So my next question would be maybe for Sebastian, but definitely for both of you. What is your opinion on how testing and the trend in testing in PHP has contributed to PHP as a language, breaking through and getting to a very good position where it is today?
One addition to the previous question, if I may, you said, or you talked about a renaissance for PHP over the last 3-4 years, which implies that there was a time when PHP was considered less cool and people looked at other languages, other stacks, because they were hipper, cooler, more hyped, whatever. And in that time, I personally was quite happy that PHP was not hyped anymore, that it was not considered cool anymore, because that meant that I didn't have to convince enterprises anymore that this is something that they can use and build business critical applications on. If you are an enterprise, you have completely different time frames that you care about, and you want to make sure that you don't choose something that is the latest hype right now, but in a month from now, the next thing comes out and proves to be better. So you need to use something that's established and proven. That being said, what really, from my perspective at least, brought PHP enterprise acceptance or adoption was a healthy ecosystem of tools and frameworks and libraries, if you want. But also the community as a whole has matured a lot over the last years. Yes. I remember, and I think I mentioned this earlier today in my session, when I talked about PHP Unit and testing for the very first time at a conference, I had 2 people in the audience, and one was there by mistake. So 10, 12 years ago, there was no sensitivity to the topic at all within the community. And it changed because, for many reasons. On the one hand, many enterprises adopted PHP by accident. Some developer wanted to solve a problem. He knew that he could solve it more quickly and more efficiently and more conveniently with PHP, and so he just did. And only later did somebody in charge, like a CTO, find out that this problem was solved in PHP. But again, this is not just limited to PHP, but this applies to the whole of open source. I remember a story that I once heard at the MySQL conference over dinner, at a speaker's dinner, where Martin Mikos was one of the VPs of MySQL AB, and he said, well, I was recently at a Fortune 500 company for a sales pitch. And they told me that they don't use MySQL yet. And I opened my notebook, I SSH'd into our web server, I looked at our access log, and I could show them that every time we make a new binary release of MySQL, IPs from their data center download it. And while I was saying that, the main system administrator became a red face. And this was his moment of truth, where he had to admit to his CTO that he was already using MySQL on hundreds of servers because it got the job done better than the MS SQL server that they were using as a corporate policy.
Yeah.
And the same thing happened with PHP. And at some point, you have business critical applications built in PHP, and then you need to make sure that they work correctly. And that's when the mentality change started. Suddenly there was a demand for quality assurance processes and techniques and tools such as PHP Unit, tools such as continuous integration servers. I remember when Sebastian Bergmann, a friend of mine with whom I already hacked interesting stuff in assembly language and C on the Amiga a really, really, really long time ago in an earlier life when I was programming. When he blogged about continuous integration for the first time, doing it for a PHP project in late 2005, early 2006, when the only continuous integration server that we had was cruise control, which I have like a really split view on, because on the one hand, it paved the way for mainstream adoption of continuous integration, but on the other hand, probably was the worst piece of software that I ever had to work with, because it crashed a lot, it ate your data for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and it was not nice to work with. But it gave us an idea that we could have such a tool, and then Kozuke came along and started Hudson and later Jenkins, and we got really useful software out of this.
Don't forget PHP under control as a layer on top of cruise control.
Yeah, so that was the PHP community's short-term fix to make cruise control work.
An abstraction of...
So cruise control was a big monolithic piece of software built by a company that should have known better. But they built this piece of crap that you could not customize.
Yes.
There was no plugin architecture. If you wanted to change something, you had to change the JSP code or the Java code or the XSLT or whatever and recompile. And Manuel Pichler went through the hassle of doing that, and also cruise control looked really, really ugly.
Yeah.
So he asked somebody who knows a little bit about HTML and CSS and JavaScript to make a new user interface and put it on top of it, and add some specific tooling so it worked out of the box for PHP projects. Just as a side note, we got emails back then from people from the Java community saying, you are abusing a piece of software that was built by Java developers for the Java community, and you as PHP developers have no right of using this.
Well, that's just that point of view which we mentioned.
At that point, I was really, really happy that by that point, Hudson was there, and I could finally go away from cruise control and PHP under control to something else. And that community was so much nicer. They welcomed our input. They developed new plugins. They made new plugin interfaces where we needed them. Whole different story.
And so the entire community grew, and
entire
PHP
community
grew, and everything.
Entire community grew.
And
I think one thing that most people associate with this renaissance is that we now have a new way of dealing with dependencies. With Composer and the whole ecosystem around that with packages and so on, which is great. One thing that I personally don't like is that many people hate pair on Twitter. Yes, the code in pair right now is bad, but you have, just like with any other piece of old code, you have to look at it from the perspective of the time in which it was built. Most of that code is 15 years old.
Yeah.
And 15 years ago, right before the release of PHP 4, Stig Bakken had this idea of a repository for reusable PHP components that you could install from the command line.
It was nothing new at the point when it was actually built.
But that was really, really great. It had its problems, sure. And we have overcome these problems now, but don't diminish the effect that it had on PHP.
And basically, what you need to have is people should be glad that we had those tools back then, as peer and Pecol, because they made our lives very easy. Now everyone is celebrating the fact that we have Composer and are bitching about the peer stuff. But if we didn't have peer, we didn't also have Composer. If we didn't have peer, we probably didn't have all the frameworks that we currently have.
You have to look at it from the perspective of the time. I mean, like earlier this year, there was somebody who said Rasmus was really, really stupid. it was the first versions of PHP that he introduced some certain concepts, and that it should be obvious that these concepts are problematic. And then somebody said, how old are you? Do you know when this decision was made? This decision was made 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And of course, if you learn programming today, you have a completely different background, a different perspective on a decision like this. And of course, if you would make such a decision today, then you would be stupid.
Yeah.
But you are talking about a decision that was made maybe 10 years before we came to the point where we could even realize that there might be a problem. So always look at it in the historic context.
Yeah,
that's a great point.
Yeah, I think this is a very, very valuable lesson, especially for people like me who are a bit younger and are actually, from that point of view, pretty much new to the entire thing. So I wasn't, born in PHP with the composer. Definitely not. I actually worked in PHP 4 and everything, but for me, here, I never used that. So it's for me. This conversation actually provides much more value because it gives me an insight which I didn't have.
Yeah. History is very important. You need to know your history, otherwise you are
that's true.
Doomed to repeat.
That's true.
Doomed to repeat it, even the mistakes. And one thing that I learned this year is that the whole concept of testing and agile software development is a lot older than most people think. So I was researching for a keynote that I gave at a conference earlier this year and realized things that the software development team at NASA that built the software for the lunar missions in the 60s, they were doing test-driven development. They were doing daily stand-ups. We forgot all about it until the late 90s when it was rediscovered. But it's not something new. It has been there. Toyota, before they were building cars, they were building looms for weaving. Mm-hmm. They have been doing that in the 1920s, and back then discovered concepts like continuous integration. They did not have the name. It was in a different context, but it was the same. And we are rediscovering all of these things in the last 10, 15 years within our industry in a different context. So it's always worth a look beyond just our scope of the industry we are working in, but also within our own industry to look in the past. And our profession of computer science and software engineering is considered a really young one compared to others, but it's old enough now that we are starting to get computer science history as a research topic where we look at how did we things 40, 50 years ago and what can we learn from that. And that's really, really interesting.
So we can actually see the roadmap, how we evolved and how some very...
Just look at things that are happening with various programming languages. Erlang was really a hype a couple of years ago, which is decades old. Recently, Oracle added features to the Java virtual machine that you can change code at runtime without stopping the application and announce this to the world as, this is groundbreaking, we have never had this. Bullshit. Common Lisp and Smalltalk had this in the 60s and 70s.
Yeah, they're born with it. Yeah, absolutely.
So, but
we are rediscovering things all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's good that we do rediscover it.
Sure.
But it never hurts to look back and think about the time where we didn't have like the massive amount of disk space or memory. I mean, I remember booting up my first DOS computer. Yeah. I needed to have specific floppies in order to boot in a specific memory setting so I could play one game, and I had a floppy for another game that had different settings because that was required for the other game. What I see now, especially everyone is doing mobile and these days, and we put huge images on the internet.
Yeah,
and then you are in this remote, distant place, and the internet is really very poor. It's like loading forever.
Yeah.
We're still dealing about the same internet that we had like back in the day when we had a 300 baud modem.
I remember spending nights on end optimizing my assembly code so that it would fit into 4 kilobytes.
Yeah.
So I could have in 4 kilobytes all the code necessary to do real-time 3D graphics, plus the graphics textures, plus the music.
Yeah.
Of course, I had more memory available, but it was a special challenge to fit as much as possible into 4K.
Yeah.
And today, people complain about, I don't know, or don't care about the effort.
We have a little bit of a performance issue. Oh, let's add some more RAM to it, new processor.
Yeah.
People, I come from that time period where 4 kilobyte was a lot. I mean, look at your floppy disk. That was 1.44 megabytes.
Yeah.
My floppies were 880 kilobytes.
Yeah. I'm talking about the floppy disks, not the floppy floppies.
No. The 3.5-inch floppies for the Amiga were 880 kilobytes.
The single
density.
Yeah. Did you know that you could drill a hole on the other end and it will expand it to 1.4?
But the interesting thing is that the same floppy for the PC with FAT file system only could store 720K.
Yeah.
For the Amiga with the default file system 880K.
Yeah.
And if you use a special file system, you could go over 1 meg.
Yeah.
And
right.
but it still worked.
It's like over 1 meg. It sounds like you were so hyped when you said that.
Yeah, but
at the time it was really convenient.
Yes.
I mean, I remember when Monkey Island 2 came out for the Amiga, it had 11 floppy disks. And a friend of mine was also into assembly language, but he was in darker areas of the Amiga scene. He cracked the game for a group, but the interesting thing that he did was he fit it on 6 disks instead of 11, so you had to shuffle less.
Yes.
This was before we had hard drives.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
This what made the game much more convenient, and it made me think, well, if he can do it, like a guy from school that's 2 years younger than me, then why the heck can Lucasfilm Games don't do it as well and just ship it out of the box like that?
Yeah.
But we digress.
Yeah,
we sound like old farts talking about before the war when we only
two guys
for the Muppet Show.
Muppet Show,
yeah. Right. Okay.
We're not that grumpy yet.
So back to the future.
Yeah.
It's a good
there's a growing framework that's like gaining popularity. It's Laravel. I think that you must have heard about it. There's a guy, Taylor Otwell, that's developing it, and I think there's a good side effect to that framework, and that's like, it's, from my point of view, it's been engineered nicely, and it forces some advanced techniques to new users. So it's like a framework that lets you enter as a rookie, and it can, provide you with value even if you're like a senior, so you can grow with the framework. So, for instance, some 5 years ago, I think, PHP programmers didn't care much about I'm not going to even say test-driven programming, but even the structure of the code itself. And now in the past two years, I think, and last year everybody is talking about DDD and even some structuring the program before you can even start programming. And I think that it educated people a lot. What's your opinion about overall PHP programmers' knowledge in general now comparing to last 5 years?
I don't want to just limit it onto PHP itself. What you say is correct. Don't forget, if you look at your own codes 6 months from now, you go like, what the hell was I thinking?
Yeah,
right?
That's correct.
So even the developers that are working on these frameworks, on these projects, they evolve as well. They learn about new concepts, they exchange ideas with other developers, they grow in their knowledge. And that will reflect also in their in the projects that they work on. And like I said, it's not just limited to PHP. You see it everywhere. You probably also have these couple of stubborn developers that say, "No, I know everything, and the rest I don't care."
Yeah, but I think that's a majority in some companies. You have like more than 50% of people that are not learning. That I've learned my deal and let me work my 8 hours.
They consider I go here from 9 to 5, doing a job, getting the paycheck, and that's it. I mean, that's their decision. If that's not their goal, their motivation, that's fine, as long as it's not impacting the business. The moment it starts impacting the business, then it's up to the business to decide whether or not they should either move ahead or find something else to do.
Yeah.
But again, there are businesses, and I don't want to be like stigmatizing for government businesses, but you see a lot of government projects that have been built like 10 years ago. And then you see guys that worked on that project from the beginning and are still maintaining that project. Why? Because government contracts, they have these 10, 15, 20-year kind of ruling. Mm-hmm. So they need to maintain it. So it's okay as long as they are still capable of keeping that thing running without problems. It's fine. But the moment that this business needs to speed up, because like in e-commerce, that's a very competitive market. Yes, doing things 10 years ago won't help you in that competitive market. You need to speed up. You need to come with new concepts, new ideas. I'm talking about e-commerce, especially in adult entertainment. Mm-hmm. You need to be there on the top of your game. Otherwise, you're out.
Yeah.
So innovation is something that needs to be happening, and
it's not just limited, if I may interject, to innovation and market pressure. Sometimes you have disruptive events, like a law changes, and suddenly you have to adapt really quickly to something. And if you did not invest into internal quality beforehand, then you are in a lot of trouble, because now you have very little time to make a very important change. And it's not like you can live without making the change and just lose a little bit of money because the competition is faster and smarter than you. No, if you don't make this change by the deadline, then you're out of business.
Yes.
Period.
Yeah.
And it's amazing how many companies did not have a thing like the single European payment area on their radar.
Yeah.
I had at least one team that used the IBAN field in the database as an identifier that the customer is outside of Germany and did not have to pay VAT.
It was a workaround, a hack.
It was a hack. It was an implementation pattern that somebody came up with at some point. Somebody wrote about it on the internet, and suddenly it was copy and pasted in dozens of code bases, and then suddenly every German has an IBAN and puts it in there, and suddenly nobody has to pay value-added tax. Well, the e-commerce platform has to pay it because the German tax system does not care whether or not
you charge it or not.
Yeah.
But that's another thing that drives these kind of innovations. And I mean, for me, it's easy to talk about being on top of your game, because I am inside the community. I go to these conferences. I get the latest trends, the newest directions of the community. I'm really on top of these things. I keep track of new tools to make my job better. But there is a whole bunch of people that are still out there in those companies, which is sad, because we're only reaching like maybe 10% of all the developers.
Yeah, exactly.
There's 90% out there that we don't reach. How do we get them involved? That's a question we have been asking since 2007 ourselves. we can contact the businesses directly, indirectly, use companies like Microsoft, like Zend, like Oracle, to feed them about information about something going on in the community, in their area. But it still requires that first step. The first step being the CTO being the development lead that actually sees, oh, this might be interesting.
Yeah.
But it has to be by choice, right?
The initial impulse has to come from the developer.
Yeah.
I want to get involved in the community, and then I guarantee you, it's really easy. You want to get involved, you look on the internet where the nearest user group is.
Well,
I always find it amazing when I get to somewhere. So for instance, earlier this year, I consulted with a company in Bucharest, and before I go somewhere where I haven't been before, I researched, is there a local user group? I couldn't find one. The developers on site complained to me that there's no user group. And I said, well, you are 100 PHP developers in this company, or almost 100. You are your own user group.
Absolutely.
Start something for yourself and invite others. You have the rooms, open them up and see who comes.
Yes.
Turns out a couple of weeks later, I'm at a conference in Germany where I meet someone from Romania, from Bucharest. And he asked me whether or not I want to come to the user group. And apparently they have a user group. It does not meet on a regular basis. And they don't have a website, but they're working on it, and
something is cooking there.
Something is cooking, so it will happen. But in the major cities around the world, there's bound to be a PHP user group.
Yeah. But like I said, I told you the story earlier. I was doing PHP as a developer in an office, and I was doing that for 5 years. And I had no one telling me I was doing a good job or a bad job. And I wanted to have some sort of,
it's routine blindness.
Some confirmation
to compare your knowledge with someone else's.
You need a peer with an outside view that looks at what you do and gives you feedback.
Yeah. It has some credibility to actually.
I actually went for the certification, the Zen certification. So I passed, and immediately, because you need to register with your email address, I get an email from Zen saying, "Hey, we have this PHP conference." Like I said, I was up there in that island of the office. I had no idea there was such a thing.
Yeah.
So I gathered all my savings together and went for the first time to ZenCon. This is exactly where I met a larger community that I wasn't aware of.
Yes.
But it was, like you said, it needs to be an initiative from the person itself. Yeah. If I didn't want to compare myself to something else that could confirm I was doing a good thing, I was never going for that certificate. I was never going to the conference, and I would probably still be in that office doing the same thing I was doing.
9 to 5.
But talking about conferences, one thing that you can see over the last couple of years happening is that it's not just the handful of conferences that is spread around the world, organized by commercial companies. You see more and more locally organized non-profit conferences pop up, which is good. It brings the conference experience closer to the local developers.
Yes.
And to be honest, I prefer to go to these kinds of conferences.
Yeah.
I'm much happier at a conference like T-Day today here in Belgrade, where I have 300, 400 really enthusiastic people that are eager to learn and have brilliant questions, then go to a commercially organized conference in the US where you have the same amount of people but get no question at all, and have basically people there that spend the day as if they were at the office from 9 to 5, and today I'm paid to be here and listen.
Yeah.
precisely, and not only that, but also the people who organize the conference regard you as a kind of an asset, and you just do your job well, and everything's going to be fine. You actually gave me a kind of an intro to my next question. So
it was not intentional.
No, I know. and so we kind of mentioned that those people who work from 9 to 5 don't have the capacity or the will to learn, and we then said, so that's where it all begins, right?
There's not necessarily anything wrong with that.
No. I don't say that.
I've met really excellent people that say, I only want to be a developer from 9 to 5.
Yeah.
And like Michelangelo said earlier, if they don't impede the business, then that is perfectly acceptable. Nobody needs to be forced to work outside the office.
Yeah.
On the other hand, most developers that I meet are intrinsically motivated to further their education on their own accord, on their own time, on their own resources. And this is something that I don't know exists in any other industry.
No.
Mm-hmm.
At least I haven't heard about it.
Well, I think we can all agree that it's good when you have different people in your teams, and you have excellent performance from people who work from 9 to 5. So they can be fantastic. But what I think they lack, and that's also not something bad and something we should just throw at them. But I think they don't have the capacity to give back to the community. So I remember from building stupid WordPress plugins. I actually don't like WordPress as a platform, but it just occurred to me one day, okay, let's build a plugin. I built a couple of plugins, and I remember people sending me emails and messages like, man, you saved my life, man, this plugin kills it, So I remember that feeling. So I wanted to ask you, from the people who actually gave to the community much more than I did, how do you perceive that feeling? What does it do for you? When people say, hey, man, thanks for doing this for the community.
It's a double-edged sword. On the one hand, you have the people that congratulate you because you face the same problem they were facing. You came up with a solution, and all of a sudden, that solution helps everyone. Mm-hmm. That's awesome, and having these people thank you for that, even years after, that's brilliant. On the other hand, you also have these people that are very incapable of change, have done things in their own way, tried your solution, and because it was something new, they couldn't really grasp around that new solution, and said it's a flaw, it doesn't work, and they attacked you on a personal level on it.
Yeah.
So
I know that.
It's on one hand you get the nice vibe from people that you actually help forward. You get the negative vibe from the people that are actually not really interested in what you're doing, but they just want to be really irritating people on the internet trolls, as we call them. I tend to forget those people. If it's constructive feedback about, okay, this is an issue and you need to fix this, I will definitely look into it and try my best to fix it as quickly as possible. But if it's trolling, I tend to ignore this. But I know other people that contribute to these projects, they taken it a little bit more personal, especially when you get messages. Okay, we know where you live and we know where your girlfriend and
that can't be happening.
It's happening.
It's happening,
and that is the sad part. But again, internet is a reflection of the world as it is.
Yeah.
So you have the nice people, and the majority is nice.
The majority is nice, but the majority is quiet.
Yeah.
The trolls are much louder. Than the nice people.
Yeah, because they're encouraged to do so, because they're hiding.
I still find it awkward when somebody thanks me for PHP Unit, because I did not think about that so many people would ever use this thing that I started 14 years ago or 13 years ago. I'm glad that I helped and continue to help so many developers with the tools that I write. On the other hand, I still cannot really believe that I touch the lives of so many people, but be that as it may, what I really have a hard time with but I think I'm getting better at it, is to ignore the trolls.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's just frustrating. So I for instance use Twitter different than probably everybody else. I do not follow anyone. I just have a search on certain keywords such as PHP Unit, and I try to look at the PHP Unit tweet at least once a day and go through it and see where somebody has a question and try to answer that question. And more often than not, I tell people that Twitter is not an issue tracker and that please open a ticket on GitHub I don't forget about it and so on. But that's okay. But also what you see a lot there is people saying things like the tool is stupid, it doesn't do this. The guy who created the tool is stupid because he did not do this, or he thinks my idea is stupid. And what most people don't realize is that over the last almost 14 years, I spent a lot of time, of personal time, on this project. It's really hard by now to not be emotional about this piece of code that I created. Of course, my mind tells me this is not you.
Yeah.
This is just something that you created.
It's something you created.
But on the other hand, the heart says, well, if somebody criticizes your code, then they criticize you, and that's a problem that many developers have.
Well, you built in yourself into whatever you output, right?
Heart and soul.
It's fact.
It's heart and soul.
It's also a fact that you cannot make everybody happy.
Absolutely.
And I get a lot of tickets, I get a lot of pull requests. And one thing that I definitely need to be better at is if I see a pull request and to me it's immediately clear that this does not make any sense, I should not just close it, but take the time, the 5 or 10 minutes it takes to explain why this is not a good idea. But on the other hand, sometimes I'm in a hurry. I want to close issues to focus on what's really important.
Yeah.
So I just close it without giving an explanation. And that's not nice from me to someone who wanted to contribute. And for that, I'm sorry. But on the other hand, it's basically a subconscious act of self-preservation, I guess.
Yes.
You're only human, and I think everybody here understands that.
Yeah, but it's also the weirdest thing is that you get these emails saying that whoever hired you to work on this project they should fire you and this kind of thing. Again, people, this is something that we do in our spare time. We don't get paid to do this. We are not supported by a company to do this. This is our own initiative. We faced a problem, we came up with a solution, and apparently we were not the only one that had that problem, and the solution works for a lot of people. And that is why we contribute to this. And we get the responses back from the people that we actually help forward, which is awesome. If you don't like our tool, you can say this on a fora or whatever. Don't attack us. I mean, this is something that we want to do for the better good. If you have the idea that you can make a better thing, stop wasting your time on attacking us. Start building it yourself.
Yeah, exactly.
Show the world that you're better.
Yeah.
That's my only thing.
Yeah.
I mean, it's easy to trust someone, but it's very hard to praise someone.
Yes, but some people find it easier to attack someone than to offer constructive comments.
Yeah, you know, criticism is actually just a form of feedback, and nobody's immune to
if
it.
It's constructive.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm all for it.
If it's not trolling, you just describe that, and I think
I
we're all
make
human.
mistakes, and I made a lot of mistakes in the development of PHP Unit. Just to give you one example, I'm not happy at all with the implementation of stubs and mocks in PHP Unit, and I'm starting to gradually phase them out. I don't plan to add any new features to them. I will fix bugs, obviously, but slowly over time I will not advocate them in the documentation as prominently as they are documented there at the moment. Starting with PHP Unit 4.5, which will be out in 9 weeks, 10 weeks. So earlier this year...
Trolls, get ready.
So earlier this year, we switched PHP Unit to an 8-week release cycle. So every 8 weeks, there's a new release with new features. So 4.4 is coming out in December. So that means first Friday of February, right before Confu, there will be PHP Unit 4.5. And PHP Unit 4.5 will have out-of-the-box prophecy support, which is the fake, dummy, stub, spy, mock library of PHP spec. And Konstantin and his colleagues and contributors did a great job to build the right library for test doubles. Something that I tried to do 10 years ago and stopped working on when somebody came along with a patch. Like, here, I finished your implementation, and I made the mistake of taking it without really reviewing the code. And that cost me a lot of pain over the years. And I really, really regret it. It's one of probably the single most thing that I regretted in the development of PHP Unit.
If you look back in the time, and we had this discussion here also, if you look back in the time frame of when you made that decision, you probably had the idea this is a good concept.
Yeah.
And even though you might have gone through the whole code, you might not agree with all the components there, but you say, oh, in overall, this was a good decision. I mean,
in hindsight, I should have waited 1 or 2 months more, finish my implementation, and not accept the thing that I got. But I didn't look at it.
No.
Yeah.
And otherwise, I would not have had something 10 years ago that is as elegant and well built, well crafted as Prophecy is today.
Yeah.
But almost there. I had lots of the ideas back then as well.
But in the end,
the idea worked.
Yeah.
So just somebody else did it, and that is fine.
Should we move out there, sort of checking us out, closing the place?
Not a problem.
You're doing keynote.
A podcast. You are
Podcast interview.
So welcome.
Say hi.
Ivan from Zagreb is joining us. Say hi.
So this just proves that we are actually on the conference.
So we hired this brilliant young actor from Zagreb to...
So we would like to personally thank you for your time that you have invested into speaking to us, and rest assured that we will deliver what you said to the broadest audience we can here in Serbia, and I hope the good word will spread, and that we're going to speak some more in some more conferences like this, which are not interest driven but community driven, and you know,
cool.
The good stuff.
Yeah, like Sebastian also said, this is a great conference. I really enjoyed the conversations I had with the people here. The organization very, very good to us. No complaints, and I love to come back here in the future. So this was a very nice experience, and it's really something I'm looking forward to experience.
That's great.
Again.
We'd love to have you here again.
Yeah.
If there's anything you would like to say to our listeners here in Serbia, now is the good time.
My philosophy is that some things can be very difficult. It can be complex, but the only way to actually solve whatever you're facing is to take a first step. It can be something. After that first step, you will see the light and come up with a solution. It might take a few more steps, but you need to take that first step in order to accomplish change.
Like another speaker quoted Karate Kid today. First learn stand, then learn fly. Take the first step.
Yeah.
And after that, it's not as scary as it is before.
Exactly.
Okay.
All right. Thank you, guys.
Thanks
Thank you very much.